Rubin, Jeff Rubin Show. This episode's a little bit of a bonus. It's a bit of a surprise, even to myself. As you know, I post an episode every week, every Tuesday, except the first Tuesday of the month. And this is the first Tuesday of the month, and I was just relaxing on my yacht, just taking the week off. But lo and behold, Pat Cassels was hanging out. We were working on something. I say, "Hey, Pat." "Hey, hello, Internet." Pat's here. And we both saw Looper separately. I said, "Hello, Internet." Is that right? No, that's okay. Okay. So that's them. Yeah. So we both saw Looper separately, and we started talking about Looper, and I was just like, I wish I had a microphone in front of you right now, and then it occurred to me that I do. So I thought, let's just record the conversation, and no one's expecting anything this week, so very casual-like. Let's just, we have to talk about Looper anyway. We might as well record the conversation.
Exactly. I think we kind of realized we were sitting down to work together, and then it was like, oh, wait a minute, we've both seen Looper and haven't talked about it yet. Yeah, we gotta have the Looper conversation. I had a similar thing with our friend Adam today, where it was like, oh my god, we've both seen Looper. There's no one here who hasn't seen it, so no spoiler situation.
Adam was on the podcast, on the metagame episode. That was Adam.
Of course, yeah.
So, but that's the thing about Looper, is it is the kind of movie that after you see it, you gotta talk about it a little. A lot of fun. And we're gonna get into the spoilers. Before we get to, discussing the movie, because I think it's the kind of movie that you need to, talk about in detail. You need to talk about what happened with it.
Although it's not that... we won't talk about it. Don't worry, the audience. We're not going to spoil anything.
I think it's the kind of movie... Before we get to the spoilers, would you recommend seeing it? I'd certainly recommend seeing it.
I would, yes.
You notice how we both had a little reservation about that.
I didn't love it.
Yeah, I didn't love it either, but at the same time, if I'm thinking about seeing Looper, go see Looper. It's a great movie, relative to other movies and expectations.
I mean, I feel like I'm normally pretty, my tastes tend to align with, what most people like, and most people I talk to like Looper. So I'm not trying to be, deliberately, curmudgeonly or deliberate. I just, I guess we can't go into too many specifics.
Right, well, let's get it. So that's our very thorough...
Well, I think, just to live in this non-spoiler space for a second, I think maybe the reason we're both... I think maybe you a little more than me are, cautiously not huge fans of it, is that, I think we both have a lot of respect for movies that try something different, are clearly, the work of one person's voice, and this is that movie. And also, that director is, he's had a great, I feel like there's a lot of, energy for that director. I think The Brick has something of a cult classic now.
That was kind of the movie that, at least for me, reintroduced Joseph Gordon-Levitt. That was the first time really I'd seen him since Third Rock from the Sun, and I'm sure he did other stuff around then, but at least for me, and I think for a lot of other people, that was the movie that made me realize that we were going to be dealing with Joseph Gordon-Levitt for a while.
Yeah, I guess he definitely deserves, is it Ryan Johnson? I should probably know how, I'm probably losing a lot of, it's either Rian or Ryan
I was just listening to the AV Club podcast, and they weren't sure either, and I interviewed him, so I feel... Oh no, I think it's possible. It wasn't the AV Club. That's another podcast I listened to about Looper. It was Darren French, who was also on the show, who we talked about Breaking Bad. He talked about Looper on his podcast.
You only have people on the show that were planning to watch Looper. Everyone who's been on this.
It wasn't planned that way, but I bet most guests of this show have seen Looper already, and it's only been out for a weekend.
But I think it's Ryan. It's possible someone just started it seems pretentious that someone just it's actually Rian Johnson.
Yeah.
Anyway, he deserves credit for nothing else of seeing Joseph Gordon-Levitt and being yeah, he will be him.
And as we discussed on that Breaking Bad episode, you and I both also saw and liked what's it called? I can't remember the name right.
Premium Rush.
But even though we both liked Premium Rush, I think we both probably enjoyed Premium Rush more than we enjoyed Looper. I think we both recommended it more enthusiastically.
Definitely.
But it's not a movie you can really talk about, whereas Looper is a movie that you're gonna have to chew on both. You gotta let it simmer in your own head, and you want to talk about it with other people.
I am never. I really don't say. I don't pretending. I hate the phrase guilty pleasure. I don't like being I don't care what anyone says. I like Star Wars or whatever. I really don't like having that attitude. I tend to think that most people have good taste or whatever. I think you and I are the only people in America who like Premium Rush. I've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of friends of mine who are bike messengers who love trashy action movies.
Bike messengers?
We live in New York. I have tons of friends who are bike messengers, and they didn't like it. And I have friends who love trashy action movies. They didn't like it, and it baffles me. I'm like, how do you not? That's the thing.
It was such a crowd pleaser. I felt like how do you not like this movie? I can understand not wanting to see it, but once you see it, I certainly think you'd like it. And I think last time we talked about the show, we were like, we both wondered what would bike messengers think of this movie. And someone tweeted at me and they said, I'm a bike messenger and I'm friends with all these bike messengers. We're going to see it and I'll let you know how it goes. And I was like, definitely, I really want to know. And then he went to see it and he was like, yeah, we all got drunk and kicked out of the theater. And I was like, perfect. That's exactly how I thought it was going to go.
Having seen Premium Rush, that's the bike messenger lifestyle. That's what Wiley would do.
Even though I enthusiastically...
Wiley is the protagonist.
Right. I was like, yeah, everyone knows Wiley. So even though I enthusiastically recommended Premium Rush, and I'm less enthusiastic about recommending Looper, I'm definitely more excited to talk about Looper. I think Looper's like a movie that'll probably stick with me a little longer. You know, like I was already having trouble remembering the title of Premium Rush.
Well, interesting thing about Premium Rush and Looper, both the products of original screenplays from a writer-director, which is pretty rare for mainstream movies this year. And actually, Joseph Gordon-Levitt he's kind of exclusively worked with writer-directors because 500 Days of Summer, I think, was writer-director. That's not true. I think that's true. I don't know. Internet will correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't, because Mark Webb directed it.
Yeah, who wrote it?
I don't know, two dudes. Sorry, but Premium Rush, Batman.
This is what happens on it. This is a bonus episode. This isn't planned, guys. This is just what happens, Mistakes are made.
Right. But can we just make this a Premium Rush podcast, actually, at this point?
Okay.
No, we're not going to do that. Let's talk about Looper. A lot more chill on Looper.
So, I can't believe we got 2 podcasts worth of conversation on Premium Rush, though,
What was the first one?
Well, last time we talked about Breaking Bad one.
Oh, we did. That's right.
So, Looper. All right, let's get into spoiler territory from Looper. Right? I think we're ready. I think
that's good, though, because, I'm a little nervous that, like, I think it's extremely likely that Joseph Gordon-Levitt is going to listen to this podcast. And when he does, he's going to be like, well, screw you, man. Looper was good. How dare you criticize my movie? But he'll be like, oh, but you guys are like Premium Rush. So, okay, I will get a beer with you.
Yeah, he is, he's out there killing it. Like, he's obviously making, like, very deliberate choices to be in good movies, like Premium Rush.
Yeah, it was a Premium Rush,
Alright, so we're getting into spoilers. And say what you will about Looper, it's like an interesting movie with a lot of interesting thoughts. But the thing is, I couldn't not be bored during parts of it. Like, it felt a little slow at times. And, I guess the thing...
We're in spoiler mode now?
Yeah, I think this is it. We're crossing the spoiler.
So if you haven't seen it, pause this, go see it, come back and not listen now.
Okay. So the thing that was surprising about the movie, like, everyone knows the premise, and it takes, like, this is not a spoiler, because this is, like, how they're selling the movie. It's, like, a full third of the movie before Bruce Willis comes back and escapes, his loop, and and just when Levitt has chased him out. That's, like, a third of the movie before that happens. So I think the real surprise that people didn't know was coming in this movie was the whole third act, which is this farm thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a lot of, I think, how you feel about the movie will hint about how you feel about the farm scene.
Yeah, with the farm act. Yeah, it definitely was a interesting choice to set a movie set in the future with all these really cool potentials for things on a farm in Kansas. Which I think is definitely a cool choice, and I really. That is not even my main beef with the movie. Although there were times when I was kind of like a little anxious for more exploration of this world he had set up.
There were certainly interesting, there were interesting, themes set up there, and, I think I appreciate what was going on there, but I just, was just a little bit less, I found myself drifting in and out of the movie, whereas, in the first third, I was, really, riveted and, wanted to hear about everything that happened next.
And I think that, the farm thing, the Kansas farm whole, sequence of scenes and the fact that keeping it there, I think came from, and this is a kind of, I'm not going to film school, but it's sort of a film schooly interpretation of the movie. It was, heavily Western influenced in that, in a lot of different ways, there's that the 6-shooter gun that he has, that the bad guy has, the sort of crony, and that the groveling, that the one character who has that 6-shooter is sort of this groveling, pathetic character who's very much of an archetype in a lot of westerns, and then also I think, but also but just setting on this like Kansas, very pastoral Kansas farm where this stranger comes into town and kind of meets this prairie woman with a shotgun. And then the thing that the cue for me was her chopping. Emily Blunt was chopping that stump with the axe, which is very much there's a movie called Shane, which is a western from back in the day, and there's this stump that they have to pull out that's like a motif. And that's super. That sounds like really. I think maybe I'm getting too specific, but I do think the movie was influenced by westerns, and I think that informed a lot of like the slightly slower pace of it, and setting it on this like desolate farmhouse. I say all that, and I wish it didn't do that. I really wanted more. I wanted more like that. My favorite scene might be when Bruce Willis tore shit through the gangster house. That was great.
Yeah, it's true. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's on me to a degree, but it's interesting that you mentioned that how that's all very westerny, because the first part of it is very noir-y. You know, it's like I like those voiceovers where he's like, and you know, there's like they're working at like the club. What's the name of the club? You know, it's like straight out of like LA Noir or whatever, which isn't even from the 50s. But you know what I'm saying? Like it's a very, and it's got the voiceovers and that kind of thing. And
yeah, you know, I think you're totally right, and I think it's both. And I think Ryan Johnson is the kind of, I mean, he's the guy who. Speaking of noir, I mean, it's a great observation because his Brick is very famously a noir set in high school. So he's clearly a guy who likes to like experiment and mix genres. And I think I could totally see him as having the brain like, okay, it's going to be a time movie. It's going to be part time travel, part film noir, part western, part this other thing.
Yeah. And which episode?
Which is cool. Which is very admirable.
The other thing that he did, which somehow we've gotten this far without bringing up, is Breaking Bad. He's directed an episode of Breaking Bad both this season and last. Which episodes did he direct? He did The Fly. Is that true?
The Fly, yeah.
I'm wondering if he did particularly noir. Breaking Bad's a noir-y.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it has that.
Well, The Fly is certainly one of the more experimental, unique episodes of Breaking Bad. So that totally fits in with his like, and it's really well shot. I mean, the whole show's well shot, but that one in particular I think was cool. And he did the one. I can't remember the name of the episode, but it was the episode with maybe the most famous scene of this last half season, where Skylar walks into the pool.
Right.
Which was a really cool moment. So he's definitely he's pretty awesome. I haven't seen The Brothers Bloom.
I haven't seen either, and I don't know any. Like no one I know has seen it as far as I know.
Yeah, but probably for some reason that's kind of his like. I think a lot of times directors like sophomore efforts are like Chris Nolan made Insomnia after Memento, and that's kind of like way fewer people have seen Memento than like anything else he's done. I feel like, but not I'm sorry, Insomnia than what he's done. But yes,
But like obviously the reason I want to talk about it is like there's a ton of interesting ideas in this movie, like a lot of really just new ideas.
Kind of.
Well, I thought one of the most interesting ideas,
by time travel movie standards, not that many. I feel like.
Maybe by time travel movie standards. Okay. I thought one of the more interesting thoughts the movie had was the idea, and even though they explain the whole premise in the trailer, this is like a little too detailed, so they leave it out. That you have to kill your future self. That you are like signing a contract to kill yourself.
Sure,
It's like a really like you could, I felt like I was distracted for the first part of the movie, just like thinking about the implications of that, like knowing that it loops back on itself that way, and like that
closing the loop. That was a very cool like gangstery kind of a cool meeting of like time travel stuff.
So I saw an article on, this is just like an interesting detail, I saw an article on Slashfilm, and it was like 10 Looper questions, not answered or whatever, and one thing they talked about, and I'm going to butcher this because it's so hard to describe these things accurately, but like, why did they have to kill themselves? Why not just have other people kill their past selves?
I had that question.
So the director explained, and he had this answer for another question too, where he's like, I thought about this, and the answer was there, but it was boring. And I hope I'm like articulating his vision of time travel correctly.
Sure.
So the idea was that if you got someone else, if someone else was going to kill you, you might kill that person. And so, like there was just more room for messiness. And there was, I think he even said, he definitely saed it was Abraham, who's the Jeff Daniels, who's awesome.
Mm-hmm. We should actually devote some time.
Yeah. He said it was like something his character talked about. It was either, I don't remember. I think he said it was film, but I don't remember. And just that like if someone else killed you, there was more room for messiness where you kill them. Whereas if you kill yourself, it's really clean and it stays like one complete.
No, that's the whole idea of like you killing the
I want more of that. I love in a movie, and this is like my bias. Like I'm like, great human drama, really interesting. I like time travel.
Right.
It's true. Like I love like that's why I think my favorite part of the movie is when this idea of you killing yourself from the future, and all that implies like. Every time he like stopped to explain some future thing, he's like, "They pay us in silver." I'm like, "Ooh, I want more of that."
Which is funny. I think maybe that's maybe part of what.
That's my point.
No, it's not. Like I mean, he did take a sort of, to a certain extent, take a stand against that kind of like obsession with logistics. There's a line in the movie where they're in the diner, Joseph Gordon-Levitt and his older self, Bruce Willis, and they kind of start going down that. Asking questions about time travel, and then Bruce Willis says, well, I don't want to talk about time travel, kind of brushes it off, which I thought was a very clever way of, like, not having to explain a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But it didn't embrace it totally, because he was like, I don't want to talk about time travel, except this one thing about me having the memories, because that's important to the plot, you know what I mean? So he kind of allowed himself just enough to tell his story.
So you're saying that when we're apart, you can remember what's going to happen.
Right. I did,
which is cool, and I like it. But you're right. Like he's like nothing matters, but this one thing's kind of important.
I mean, but that said, I really do love like just certain very specific elements of his like view of time travel were really cool. Like when they jump to there's a scene where it jumps ahead like 50 years or whatever, 30 years I guess, and you see. Bruce Willis is being sent in. You get a glimpse of the time machine. I love the design of the time machine. It's very like. I feel like it's like, in some ways, it seems like the most realistic time machine I've ever seen on film.
It's just like a bathysphere, which is a word I only know from BioShock. Just like
a dome with tubes and stuff.
Yeah, and just like brass piping coming off of it in all directions.
It like it looked like the way a machine that like breaks space-time rules would look. And a second thing I really loved is how when someone appeared from the past, there was no like Terminator style lightning bolts or like morphing of space-time. They just like appeared in an instant, like which somehow almost seems more realistic to me of what time travel might be.
No, it's definitely the energy ball, like Terminator.
Just like I don't know. I just think it'd be like.
I think you're probably right, but that energy ball in Terminator is totally awesome. How it like takes off like that rounded corner of it. Yeah, that's just James Cameron.
Totally. Actually, it's funny you say we got to Terminator because there's actually
it's still like it's in a ball. It's like a sort of a similar thing.
Yeah,
like you're like trapped in a little time ball of some kind.
Yeah, and it's also not the if you're sent alone, you're not sent like with the machine. It's not like the H.G. Wells time machine or something. But the Terminator is kind of funny you say that because Bruce Willis's like journey, Bruce Willis's like drama in that movie, in Looper, he is the Terminator because it's the same thing. Like in the Terminator, like Schwarzenegger's got the list of the Sarah Connors and he's going killing them one by one, and that's essentially what Bruce Willis is doing with the kids.
Yeah, Bruce Willis killing children is definitely that was not in the trailer.
Yeah.
So you were like, oh, all right, this is that kind of movie, which is cool. I like that the movie's well done, but like, it was like, it's definitely a moment you're like, oh, okay, this is serious, and it's one of the more interesting things. And I think really the most interesting thing about this movie is the idea, and the thing I've been thinking about in the days since I saw it, is that like they are the same person, and that like he's like a good guy and a bad guy, both as a young person and an old person in different ways, is really interesting. And like even watching the movie, even though it's explained, it's difficult to think of them as the same character. And I mean this as a compliment to the movie. It's such an interesting idea. It's like difficult to appreciate that one grew up to be the other. Yeah. But when you think about that, look at the scenes through that lens, I think there's a lot of. I think that's probably what the movie will be remembered for, like this interesting relationship between him and his older self. That said, I think probably the weirdest. I honestly think this is one of the weirdest decisions I've ever seen in a movie. Making Joseph Gordon-Levitt look like 10% more like Bruce Willis the entire movie. I think
it wasn't necessary.
One of the strangest decisions, because on one hand, the thing I just said, like the whole crux of the movie is this idea that like he is the same person, like that had to be reinforced. But I don't think that helped do that necessarily. It's a little distracting just because you know what Joseph Gordon-Levitt looks like. You've got his Bop poster on your wall,
Right.
So you know the contours of his dreamy fit. You know what he looks like. So it's like a little bit distracting. I don't know that it helps bridge that gap, which is difficult only because it's such an interesting idea that he is the same person. And also, Bruce Willis isn't even in the movie that much. He's
Yeah.
top billed because he's Bruce Willis, but it seems like it would have been way easier to make Bruce Willis look a little bit like Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Yeah, it's also even if they didn't give either of them any prosthetics and just said they were both the same person, I don't think it'd be the most. It would not be the most egregious example of like future past selves looking different in movie history. I can't think of specific examples, but I think I've seen a movie where like Eric Stoltz plays like a younger, sprightlier Abe Vigoda or something like that.
Right. Even within the same movie, Paul Dano's older self is not an older Paul Dano.
Yeah.
Like, even within this one movie, like, they were like, well, we can't do this twice. We know this is a little silly.
That's where that scene, that sequence,
that part was awesome. And
Yeah.
also one of the best, but one of the, like, new, original, like, you've never seen a scene like that. Obviously, it doesn't hold up. The scene where he's, like, disintegrating as he walks.
There's that movie. Did you ever see Frequency? That Dennis Quaid movie.
That's a great movie.
Yeah, there's a scene there's some time travel stuff, man. There's a scene where like it's that weirdly literal. I think it's not how time travel works though, but whatever. It was a fun sequence.
Well, it's not
like,
time travel, I believe. I think, and I saw the movie once in theaters, by the way, would be declaring it a great movie. Where I believe he's broadcasting into the past. No one's time traveling, but they're changing the past.
Right, and specifically, I just remember there's a big fight scene in the future, the present. Jim Caviezel's fighting this old guy who's like a murderer in the '60s, and like when he went back in the '60s, they're all his dad's fighting the same character, and like he chops his hand off, or like burns his hand off. I don't know, whatever. But to go back to the blooper, I'm sorry. That was an awesome scene and very horrifying.
What did you think of the fact that the movie had telekinetics?
Yeah, I mean, I was not totally into that. I thought that it just didn't jive with the rest of the movie for me. I don't see. I said this to you before.
Right before I was like, hold on, like jammed the mic in your face.
Yeah, it does. I feel like there's like this kind of unwritten rule. It just seems the movie sort of. I just don't think it's the kind of movie that felt like it was allowed to have two entirely separate, impossible things in it. I was like, either it's a world where time travel exists, or it's a world where telekinesis exists. In fact, that's both kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Maybe it's two, and maybe it's the fact not that it's two, but it's only two. Like if telekinesis and time travel exist,
Right?
Why, maybe there's aliens too. And like,
yeah.
Well, there's jet motorcycles. That's a thing.
Yeah, jet motorcycles.
Little cheap.
Which actually that. I did like the scene where Joseph Gordon-Levitt was riding the hovercycle because it kind of reminded me of Premium Rush when he's riding the hovercycle. So I felt like Ryan Johnson was sort of borrowing from Premium Rush there.
Invoking Premium Rush,
We should talk about Jeff Daniels also.
Yeah,
Wait, do we actually describe the scene? The Paul Dano scene. We kind of just said we were talking we're just like two kids. You're like, and the one part and the other part.
Well, that part was.
Let's describe.
The implicate. I mean, if they're listening, they saw the movie at this point, right?
I guess so.
So the implication of that scene, I think I understood this correctly, is that they're going to keep Paul Dano alive for the next 30 years or something.
But if they're keeping him alive, this is the flaw for me. If they're keeping him alive and like helping him, how does he get to the place? If he's a dismembered person at that point, like mutilated, how does he live his life enough and get to the same place where he's back in
as he
time?
travels back?
I think they kind of address that with like. They sort of address that, but the way they address it is it's in that diner scene with the Bruce Willis. I don't know about time travel or whatever. They kind of say that like
filed under I don't want to talk about time travel. That's a minor detail.
Yeah, it just sort of had this like attitude of like it only wanted to tell us. I don't. He's claiming he has everything figured out, and I just feel like I don't know if he did or maybe he doesn't need to. I don't know. I'm definitely hesitant to criticize it because it's obviously like he's obviously
this
the
doesn't bother me
challenging
like going down this path of like, well, how does he if he's the thing? Like that doesn't bother me. The point is like I was legitimately terrified when I thought that they were going to keep him alive for the next 70 years just to like bring him back to life for the moment to dismember him again, or however that works. Like I found that moment terrifying. That's like good enough for me. Like I don't have.
When they sent him forward,
I'm saying because that part was so effective. Like I didn't have time to think about like, well, then how does this happen? How's that? So that doesn't bother me at all. Isn't that?
So wouldn't he have been dismembered the second he traveled through time? Then when he arrived?
Definitely. Like that's how that scene I think doesn't hold up to time travel scrutiny, but like it was very effective, and I think that counts.
Well, I think one aspect of the movie I did like, um, which is not doesn't even really involve the time travel that much, is like the setting of it. It's my favorite sci-fi setting, I think, which is just sort of like not too distant future where like society's America specifically is like kind of starting to crumble or
Eye drop drugs.
yeah, but it's more like the idea that like it's all Chinese currency and like gold, and there's that scene where the guy shoots the guy, the guy steals his suitcase and he shoots him with a shotgun.
Yeah.
It's a very classic thing. It kind of reminded me of Children of Men, which I love that movie, and it's the same. That's not America, it's England, but it's the same kind of like, shit's starting to kind of curse.
Yeah.
Shit's starting to go wrong.
It's your first time on the show?
No, I don't remember if I cursed before though.
Yeah.
Jeff Daniels?
Jeff Daniels kind of dispatched very unceremoniously. Did I say that already? But I thought that was the most notable thing about him. Was like, oh, Jeff Daniels isn't in the movie anymore.
Yeah.
Almost because he's Jeff Daniels. Like, again, this is like my expectations and like my fault, but like almost like he must not be really dead because he's Jeff Daniels, you know?
No, I think it was Ryan Johnson being like tasteful or like trying to be like moody, sort of, with this like not showing us. I thought it was done in a way that was kind of like interesting and harrowing to just like cut it back to him and there's a bullet in his head. That said, I sort of would have minded like just seeing Bruce Willis like blown away.
It's just like shaking. Yeah, it's true. It's true. I kind of found the action, and this is not my problem with the movie.
I think maybe we need more teeth here. I thought we were being very.
No, this is my problem with the movie, but I did find the action very unsatisfying, like that in that scene, and also the scene where he shoots the guy and you just see the motorcycle come out of the cloud. Like, I thought it was interesting, but like ultimately unsatisfying. Like, he's like that kind of villain. You bring him back 3 times, then you like gotta see him dispatched. And I just found that ultimately unsatisfying movie.
I was kind of go, oh man, well, I think Jeff Daniels was great.
Yeah,
I thought he.
Well,
Also, it's such a cool
concept as the villain.
It's such a cool concept that he was sent back in time to like set up this organization. Which also, like, the movie's not really that much, like you said before, it's not really a time travel movie. It's like a movie where people are sent back to this present that we're in. But there's really, you can't go back and forth through time. It's just it's a one-way street.
I was wondering how they were getting the messages to where people were going to be. Like, who sends that information back? How does that work? That is the kind of shit that I would like. I love those details. Like, please explain it to me in a promotional graphic novel. I'd love to hear all about it.
Right.
I mean, that's not what the movie was interested in serving, which is probably the correct answer to like serve this human drama instead. But me, I want to know every detail about like how he was chosen and said be sent back.
No, I think the movie's kind of. I was very excited. I still haven't done it yet, but I'm very excited to sort of dive into like. I want to read that article about like the 10 things.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's what he wanted because, like, I know a big criticism of Inception was that, and I rewatched it recently. And I love that movie. I said this to you before. I bought it on DVD, and it'll probably be the last movie I ever buy on DVD because I don't buy DVDs anymore. But
we did a whole episode about it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh God, Jesus Christ. I need more hobbies. But one criticism the movie had is that the people had the movie is that it's over-explanatory. Like, if you watch the movie, like almost every scene, it's like Leonardo DiCaprio or Joseph Gordon-Levitt speaking of like how he's. I just completely forgot he's in that movie until I said it.
Yeah.
So, is always explaining stuff to Ariadna or whoever. This movie didn't really do that quite as much. I mean, it had some of it, but like I think you also want to not worry about it too much. And maybe it's not for the worst, but I'm kind of with you where like I like stuff to chew on.
You know what the thing is? There's just